I was a little surprised by the letter that the Republican caucus sent to the governor, kind of reaffirming their position on no new taxes, considering earlier in the week I had read some comments from Senator Ortman, Senator Miller, and others about their willingness to look at revenue that maybe even tax expenditures weren't considered tax increases. So I don't know what happened after those comments were made to the press and recorded that all of a sudden this letter surfaced. It almost appears like somebody is kind of pulling everybody together, getting them back on the same page. And then you probably saw my response back to them to kind of let's just get reaffirmed what a tax increase is and what one isn't. Then I guess we all know going forward here relative to tax expenditures and sales tax expansions, even if the rate is lowered, our property tax is a tax increase. And a number of their members have introduced local option sales tax bills, which will be tax increases at the local level. I mean, they're the author of the bill, so whether they view local sales taxes as a tax increase, and I guess I'm looking forward to their response. I asked for a response in the letter so that we kind of figure out where we are. And I guess their letter said that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So I think they would be wise to get to work on the budget, to leave the campaign behind. If they really intend to put a budget together with $32 billion of spending, they have a lot of work to do. And I notice in the tax committee, at least, we haven't had any discussion about what might be included in a tax bill. We're still doing some overview on the governor's budget, hearing a couple smaller bills that aren't related to the state budget. And I'm told that in many of the finance committees, they're still doing overviews on the budget and on the departments. So my counsel to them would be, if you're really going to adhere to your March 25th deadline, where your bills are going to be out of committee sitting in full finance, people ought to get to work and leave the campaign behind, because I really read yesterday's letter as just more of the campaign trail. And I just want to remind them they now have a job to put a budget together, and let's get going on it. Monday they'll have the final forecast numbers, and I expect under the Senate rules they're going to have their budget targets to the Senate by March 10th. I think they better get going.
Would we be seeing a different response from them if the governor had left the campaign behind and put together a different kind of budget proposal himself?
Well, I think what happened for the governor was, things he said on the campaign trail. I think his budget proposal had to reflect more current information when the November forecast came out. His job got much more difficult when the November forecast came out than it was when he was on the campaign trail. So, but their positions, even though I think he modified his position relative to the new information in November, their position still seems to be the same. Paul?
Yeah. Oh, no, that's well, I would generally reiterate what Senator Bakk just said. The majority has had the luxury of sitting on the sidelines here criticizing the governor's budget for a week and a half now, and it's time that they get into the game and put their budget forward. I mean, the fact that they're going to have to wait a couple more weeks to put a budget target together actually makes no sense to me, because they've said all along that $32 billion is enough. Kind of regardless of what the forecast says, I expect that their budget forecast is going to be based on $32 billion. They could have gotten that done and been working on it since December 1st, when we got the last forecast. So, the forecast does come out on Monday. Regardless of what it says, we are still going to be facing a huge challenge and a huge shortfall, a huge budget deficit. The March 25 deadline is rapidly approaching, and the Republican majorities ought to be getting to work. I'm seeing the same thing that Tom has seen in the Senate over in the House, which is spending not much time actually doing the hard work of putting a budget together and unveiling those things. And here's another thing that I'm really concerned about. In order for the people in Minnesota to have a voice in what is going to be a devastating budget proposal, and more importantly, a voice in what their tax dollars are going to be doing, the majority has to start doing their job, needing to set targets, but actually allowing some time for public input. This rushed process that they put in place, and I'm pleased that they want to move it forward, but I really hope that they do give us time, do give the public time to see what their proposals are, to put them on the table, and not just leave a couple of days and late nights with which to rush this budget through the committee process, which is really the only time that the public can have their input into the budget. I'm afraid what we're going to see is a process where the entire committee process is crushed into 2 or 3 days, and we're going to have zero democracy. And that's not what's best for Minnesota. You know, the Republican leadership has said all along that they heard from voters that $32 billion is enough. $32 billion is a lot of money, and if you're going to spend it, tell us what you're going to spend it on, but isn't that enough? This week, there does seem, as Tom alluded to, there does seem to be a change. Representative Kriesel and Murray, and I understand Speaker Zellers as well, at the electric co-op meeting earlier this week, all of whom campaigned on this idea that $32 billion is enough, have now started to suggest, well, maybe we need some more money to meet our needs. And then you ask them later on again, and they'll say, oh, no, actually, $32 million is enough. I think the people of Minnesota deserve an answer to that question, and that's why we need these budget targets to come out immediately so we can see what we're working with, whether they're going to keep their promises to the people of Minnesota and put forward a budget that is kind of true and honest to their principles. And then the people of Minnesota really can stand up and compare and voice their opinions on what's the best direction for the state of Minnesota.
The Republicans just said that they still haven't, they have seen a document from the governor, but they haven't seen any DFL or carry the budget, the governor's budget, as a piece of legislation.
Well, I don't think
what's
it's
going on there?
unusual. I mean,
It's not unusual.
I mean, we certainly went through that during the plenty years, where the budget sheets and the books for the committees to look at came out, and the language always followed weeks later.
In Health and Human Services, it didn't come out, the Plenty's budget didn't come out, I think, until after we passed our first budget off the House floor.
So that's not unusual, but one thing I forgot to mention about the letter that all 37 members signed, I mean, I read it twice to make sure that I understood it, and it appeared to me they were all taking the no tax pledge. That's certainly how it appeared to me, and I think that is irresponsible. I think the idea that somehow you are going to pin yourself down in the negotiations with the governor, kind of with one hand behind your back to find a final budget for the state, is really going to make reaching an agreement with the governor difficult. There's going to have to be compromise by both the Republican majorities and the governor, and I think that's what people expect. Many of them talk about we have a mandate. Well, you know what? Mark Dayton ran statewide and won. So this notion that somehow because they won more legislative districts that somehow they have a mandate, well, the point is the governor won statewide. I don't hear him banging on his chest that he somehow has a mandate. But this kind of rhetoric that I saw yesterday is just not helpful at trying to build some compromise and some consensus to move this session forward.
Mr. Leader, if the budget forecast on Monday is substantially better, I'm sure a lot of folks are hoping that. Whether that's realistic or not remains to be seen. But if it is substantially better, I don't know, $1 billion better or something like that, would that lessen the need for tax increases or revenue increases, as you term them?
Well, it certainly will make developing a final budget easier.
Can you do it without tax increases if there's
No.
a substantial improvement in the forecast?
Well, I think if you just kind of look at the raw numbers, last year's budget was $34 billion and some change. And this year's, but even if you froze at last year's budget level, you did everything Tim Plenty did, assumed there was no inflation, and you passed the same budget in this biennium, it's still over $2 billion short in revenue from the $32 billion we're going to collect. So even if we all came to an agreement that, well, we're going to pass a budget with the same level of spending as the previous biennium, there's still over a $2 billion shortfall.
So even in that case, you're saying that if Republicans held their pledge to keep it at the current levels, the tax increases would still be necessary in your judgment?
Revenue of some kind is going to be necessary, and I suspect they're going to find some way to call the revenue not taxes.
Well, here's the, I mean,
Property taxes? I'm sorry for monopolizing. It's going to be property
Governor
taxes.
Plenty raised, I don't know, over $100 million a year, and he called it a health impact fee. Now, whether they're going to call it fees or surcharges or surtaxes, I guess we're going to call it what they're going to call it, but there will be new revenue in this budget solution.
And are you willing
well,
to
they're
pay that,
still,
James?
they shouldn't be putting any new revenue in their first budget solution, though. And because they said they didn't need to spend any more money. And so whatever they call them, they should put a budget that's true to their word so the people in Minnesota can see what they've been talking about all the time. And the other thing I think is really important, if it improves by $1 billion, we still have a $5.2 billion shortfall. You know, no, however you slice or dice the numbers, we're going to be cutting $5.2 billion.
Are you going to play the surcharge is not a tax and the fee is not a tax game this year to get out of it?
Well, I mean, the state statute's pretty clear. I mean, you can go look at statute where it defines what a tax is, and in law, we define a tax, and a tax is a fee, it's a surcharge, it's a surtax. It's actually in law. You have to check with Senate Council to find out where the statutory reference is, but I actually read the statute to the Senate Tax Committee a couple weeks ago about what the state law defines as a tax.
And regardless of that, the people of Minnesota don't care about us playing word games. It's either going to be more money coming to help us pay for public safety and schools and nursing homes, or it's not going to be. It's money coming out of their pockets one way or the other, and that's how public policymakers should be approaching it.
Senator Koch said that they plan to bring up the governor's tax proposals before and put it to a vote. Have you heard that, and what's your response?
Well, I'm sure they can probably do that. Constitutionally, they would need a House tax file over in the Senate, or the bill would be unconstitutional. So I guess I would be, if they're going to propose to do that, I would expect the House would send a tax file over so that the bill did originate in the House. If they try to just put that amendment on a Senate file, that's unconstitutional to pass that bill. So somebody might want to remind them of that they, when they got sworn in, they agreed to uphold the Constitution. But certainly the House could send over some kind of a, federal conformity tax bill or something that then a tax amendment would be germane to, and they certainly could have that vote. But I think that vehicle has to emerge on the Senate floor first.
Assuming they get a vehicle, what do you think of it as a political tactic?
They should get to work on actually balancing the budget. They have 4 weeks from today to put a budget together to cut $6.2 billion or $5.2 billion or whatever number it's going to be after the forecast. That's what they should be spending their time on instead of putting these votes up, and particularly because we're going to have a new budget forecast, right? So the proposal that the governor would have put forward, he himself is going to change in light of the new budget forecast.
Well, I think one of the issues of taking a vote on anything where you don't actually have the language in front of you, I mean, they'd have to do it with some kind of an amendment on the floor of the Senate, is without the governor's actual tax bill and the language in front of you. I mean, I can just tell you the piece I'm a little concerned about in the governor's budget, because I don't know enough, is about the whole foreign royalty subtraction. You know, currently we allow our major corporations that have operations offshore to bring 80% of that offshore revenue back into Minnesota. The argument, of course, is, we want 3M to bring foreign earnings back here to invest it in research and development in Minnesota. That is a critical piece in the governor's tax bill that I need to know more about before I can vote for the governor's tax bill. And so far, we don't have that language. We haven't had any testimony on it in the tax committee. And there's a lot of other provisions, a lot of smaller provisions, frankly, that I think we need to understand what they mean. We certainly don't want to pass something that has some unintended consequences. So until we actually have the governor's language and have testimony in the tax committee, I think it'd be pretty difficult to make an argument you were making a good sound vote on the floor of the Senate.
Well, Mr. Leader, the overall concept of the governor's tax bill, and I understand that there's details in there. The overall concept, at some point, I assume that Republicans are going to, put the heat on and bring that for a vote. I'm talking about the upper bracket increases and so on, and the statewide property tax increase. Will that get all of Democrats' votes in the Senate is really the question.
Well, I think standing by itself, I don't know the purpose of that. To vote for new money then when you don't have any clue where it's going to get spent, I think is just a political game. I think once they bring their finance bills to the floor for passage, if they wanted to offer up a tax increase to mitigate some spending so that you can make a direct linkage about what spending reductions wouldn't have to happen with the tax increase, I think then you'd have a good solid vote of, is this additional tax revenue worth mitigating these cuts? I think you need to have that linkage, but tax increases on their face when you don't have any idea how it might impact spending is pretty arbitrary.
And can I just do one other thing? I mean, if you want to follow up on that, but Representative Runbeck put in this bill to cap property taxes that went through her committee. Clearly an admission by Representative Runbeck and the Republicans that the budget that they're putting together is going to increase property taxes. Why else would we need to put a state cap on if the decisions we're making at the state don't increase property taxes? It's really like flooding someone's basement and then taking the bucket away. That would allow them to bail it out. So I think this whole argument that they've been having for the last week over the idea, questioning this idea that is very well settled historically, that cuts to local government aid are going to increase property taxes, should be set aside by the fact that Representative Runbeck is putting this bill forward.
But you guys oppose the freeze, right? I mean,
What we support is actually supporting local units of government through the LGA formula.
A more global question. Is there a divide between the governor and the legislature, given that he, unlike Plenty, didn't come from the legislature and both of the leaders ran against him?
No.
No, I don't believe. In fact, I would say that the fact that Paul and I were on the campaign trail with him, we probably know him better than other members of the legislature, probably have a stronger relationship wanting to work together than other leaders might have had with
And
him.
does that make you more likely to support his proposals because you spent so many days and nights in debate?
I think it puts us in a very strong position to broker a deal with the legislature on behalf of the governor.
Will any of your members actually put forward this tax plan that the Republicans are suggesting? It sounded like they were suggesting one of you on the DFL side would put it forward. Are you planning on doing that, or are any of your members going to do that next week?
Well, I think that the governor is going to be coming out with a revised budget. So
This is more of a technical question: are Democrats going to carry or put forward the bill on the Senate or House floor, or are you going to make Republicans do it?
Well, I know this. Senator Marty wants to carry the governor's tax bill. Senator Rest actually came to me and said she would like to also author it. So when we get the language, certainly we're going to introduce it. Senator Ortman has committed to give it a hearing in the tax committee. I guess assuming a hearing is going to lead to a vote, if she passes it out of the tax committee up to the floor, I imagine the full Senate's going to vote on it.
but Mr. Leader, if you object to it to the point where it's kind of out of context, if I'm understanding it correctly, a vote just on the tax bill itself on the Senate floor, I think you're arguing is kind of out of context. I mean, wouldn't your authors then just sit on that bill or withdraw it so that it doesn't get to that point of the floor? Considering it's kind of a frivolous vote, it's a gotcha vote for you guys.
Well, we're not going to control the flow of the legislation. I mean, if the tax chair has committed to hear the bill, and if she decides that the Republicans want to put up votes, they have the votes in the committee.
They have to vote for it in committee to get it to the floor.
We're outnumbered.
I don't think they're going to do that.
8-5, I think, in the tax committee. So certainly, even if all 5 Democrats vote for it, 2 Republicans are going to have to vote for it to get it up to the floor. I mean, but if you really want to take it through the process, how it's supposed to go, have the bill, have all the testimony on it, and then have a vote on it. I'll vote for it in committee to get it up to the floor.
Do you view eliminating the so-called tax expenditures as a tax hike?
Well, you notice the letter I sent to Amy yesterday asked that question is, because I do want to know from their caucus perspective if it is or not, and I guess we'll see what she comes back and
Well,
says.
she said today, didn't she?
Yeah, she said
I-
very specifically it is.
I believe that if you tax something that's not taxed today, that people are going to view that as a tax increase, if you don't currently tax it. But
The tax expenditure review document that you saw in committee says for every time you eliminated a tax expenditure, you would reduce the rate for everybody else. So it wouldn't be a tax increase, right?
Depends how you structure it. That's right, but it could be a tax increase on one person and a reduction for everybody else, right? So the people that are getting the benefit of that tax expenditure, they probably will be paying more money. And there may be very good reasons to do that. In fact, I think for some of these tax expenditures, there are very good reasons to do that. But, it does depend on how you structure it. But taken alone, which I think was Tom's question, whether closing a loophole or closing a tax expenditure is a tax increase, it clearly takes more money out of Minnesotans' pockets.
Guys, I actually just want to be considerate. The racial justice folks wanted to start at 11, and they let us go.
All right.
thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Talk individually, sorry.